wasn't planning on killing you, but you're making it very tempting.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in the first trailer for The Bad Batch Season 3. We are so excited to break this baby down for you. And as you know, we covered every single episode of The Bad Batch so far, and this show plays a crucial part in the Star Wars saga, transitioning from the refined Republic to the evil Galactic Empire. The show's theme is about how the Empire is ruining the galaxy with conformity and stamping out anybody who is different. We see this show repeated throughout the Age of the Empire, especially in great shows like Andor. And most importantly, this show is explaining this.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
And just a reminder, everybody, if you want your very own Somehow Palpatine Return shirt, we do sell them at our merch store, ScreenCrushMerch.com, where we design all the merch ourselves. We also have this Where He Goes, I Go shirt with Grogu and Din Djarin riding Elliot's bike from E.T., and this Say No to Death Stick shirt, plus many more Star Wars-inspired shirts and hoodies. Shopping our merch store is the best way for you to directly support our channel, and also, hey, come watch us live in Brooklyn, New York on February 22nd. Links for all that stuff is below. And I'm also going to talk about how this trailer returns one of the all-time great Clone Wars characters, who, by the way, is supposed to be dead. We are going to explain exactly how Asajj Ventress could be alive a little later in the video. So let's break this baby down. We open on a chase on a cliffside with an Imperial Low Altitude Assault Transport Ship, or LAT, chasing the Bad Batch in a HAV-W A6 Juggernaut, a ship that we have previously seen in the Battle of Kashyyyk. Now, maybe this means that this is actually happening on Kashyyyk using some leftover hardware for combat, which could mean that we could see the return of the former Padawan Gungi who we saw in Season 2. But I actually think this might be some kind of daring rescue after they get Omega and Crosshair from Mount Tantus.
Mount what?
Okay, so very brief refresher on where we left off with this show. In Season 3, the Bad Batch separated from Sid, and they actually found an idyllic community where they could finally settle down. But, long story short, the Empire kidnapped Omega and brought her to the same cloning facility where Crosshair is being held.
Or why'd they take Omega?
Well, remember, Omega is the only other unaltered clone of Jango Fett, and the other is Boba Fett. So her genetic material would probably be useful. But most importantly, the Empire wants the help of a Kamino cloner named Nala Se, who raised Omega and still cares for her very much.
If you refuse or fail, Omega will suffer the consequences.
So Omega is basically a hostage to assure her cooperation. This means Omega can move freely about the facility and help Nala Se out, and from the looks of this trailer, she's been there for quite a while, but more on that in a bit.
Well, guys, I got laid off.
Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that. I hope you're okay.
Nah, it's all good. Now I get to be fun employed. Yay!
Yeah, but what are you gonna do for money?
Money?
Yeah, man, like providing a service for goods and currency. Actually, you know what? I know exactly what you should do. You should learn programming and back-end website development. The median salary for back-end website developers was $100 grand in 2023.
Yeah, I don't know anything about computers, though.
That's okay, because you can learn programming from Boot.dev. They're our partner for this video. Boot.dev is essentially a programming RPG where you can earn XP and complete quests. You see, Boot.dev understands that the best way to learn coding is to make sure that you are never bored during the process. So they make learning fun and even competitive. The platform gets your hands on the keyboard and gets you writing a ton of code right away. So if you've ever wanted to learn coding, believe me, this is absolutely the best way to start, because you're going to learn by doing. But learning code is also not just some get-rich-quick scheme, and Boot.dev helps you to go deep and learn the fundamentals so you are as prepared as you possibly can be for your new job search. But best of all, they want to make sure that you're spending your money building a career that's actually right for you. So they offer a 30-day, no questions asked refund policy and a free demo of every course and its interactive features. So guys, for a fun, interactive way to learn programming, click the link in the description and use my code to get 25% off your first payment for Boot.dev. That's 25% off your first month or your first year, depending on the subscription that you choose.
Yeah, that Boot.dev sounds like a pretty good deal. I'm gonna go do it now.
Yes, it is. Now, back to what I was saying. The crew are rescued by Phee Genoa, Wanda Sykes' character from last season. Notice, too, that the troopers on top of the tank are regular stormtroopers and no longer clone troopers. Ever since Season 1, we have seen the Empire slowly transition away from clones, and now we're going to see the Bad Batch go up against troopers who are cheaper and, far more inept. You know, the stormtroopers we're used to from the original trilogy.
I just want a railing. You know, one railing, right here.
Also, the Bad Batch are going to have fewer qualms about murdering these guys.
Yeah, like they always save the stunt setting for their clone brothers.
Exactly. And then we go to Hunter and Rex having a conversation.
I thought that the end of the war would mean an end to losing more of our brothers.
Now, when Rex talks about losing more of their brothers, we think about Tech, who sacrificed himself to save the team in the finale last season. Real heartbreaker. No! And that's really the arc of this series. Can the clones finally have peace? Can they walk away and save just whichever of their brothers that they can? Because, as we saw last season, the Imperials do not regard these clones as people, only as tools.
Fantastic. More clones.
Problem, sir.
I don't like used equipment.
And then we see a shot of a ship flying to Coruscant, and this space station caught my eye. This actually looks more like a Regulus Type 1 space station from Star Trek than a station we'd normally see around Coruscant. And then we cut to shots that are meant to show or symbolize dead clones. A Bomar monk palace that looks a lot like Jabba's palace, with either wreckage or a funeral pyre outside its walls. And then there's this crashed shuttle. Now notice it's covered in moss, like it's been there for a while, and these two figures are walking away from it, as if they were investigating the crash but had to blow a hole in the side to examine it. If the Bad Batch do return to Kashyyyk and use appropriated hardware, this actually could be a relic from the Battle of Kashyyyk. And then we see this shot of Wrecker shooting at these Nimbus class V-Wings, the very early models of TIE fighters. And look who is with him on the left. You gotta play it slow, but there she is. That is Omega's energy bow. So we can presume that she does escape during the season and that this might even be their escape from Mount Tantus. They say,
You can't just walk away. Not with the Empire imprisoning the kid.
So, like, this sentence, along with Omega's longer hair, tells me that this might be taking place as long as a year after last season. Now, it's interesting that Rex is talking about walking away, because in Tales of the Jedi and in this show, he has been very much ready to rally clones to fight the Empire. And yet, when we met an elderly Rex in Star Wars Rebels, he was basically in retirement. So I think this season we're going to see events that finally convince Rex that it's pointless to fight the Empire and that he should walk away. Which also is interesting, because his old pal Ahsoka Tano goes on to help found the rebellion and coordinate rebel cells, as we saw in the show Star Wars Rebels. This show is not going to be the ending for Rex, but it's definitely going to be him closing a chapter before the next one opens up in Rebels Season 2. And then we get this shot of Imperial troop transports on this planet. Notice there's all these skiffs around them that are covered in cloth, and the citizens are all running away. I actually think this is the same as the Pink Sky world that we see later in the trailer. And this is also where we see this black armored clone leading the stormtroopers. So that's going to end up being one of the biggest questions of the season. Remember, there was a mysterious clone last season called Clone X, with no name, no serial number, and he was an Imperial assassin who died in Season 2.
He's an assassin. His identifying number's been wiped.
So these guys are like deep cover Black Ops clone troopers. And of course, there's probably more than one, because what's the point of a clone if you don't make more than one? These will probably be some of the last clones to ever work for the Empire. Now the planet could also be Obadiah, the home planet of the Pike Syndicate. Now we've seen this planet a few times in the Clone Wars, but it's really significant here for a couple potential reasons. One, it's where Master Sifo Dyas was killed by Dooku, keeping the clone army a secret for a decade. So you can almost say that the story of the clones actually began on this world. If the clones are trying to investigate exactly how they came into being and how Palpatine manipulated them into existence, well, then finding Sifo Dyas' shuttle and uncovering that mystery like the Jedi did during the Clone Wars is a great place to start. But most importantly, this is the planet visited by Asajj Ventress after the Clone Wars.
Oh my gosh, who is Asajj Ventress?
So Asajj Ventress, and we're going to talk about this later too, she's Dooku's former apprentice from the Clone Wars. Now Palpatine ordered him to part ways with her, so he tried to kill her, and then she became a bounty hunter. And she actually became kind of a good guy in the books, but I'll explain that a little later in the video. I'm also wondering if they're susceptible to mind control. And by mind control, I don't mean like a control chip in their heads. I mean like Palpatine could actually be manipulating these guys with the dark side of the Force. Or they could be very early versions of the Purge Troopers that we saw in the Jedi Survivor games. So, Omega is on Mount Tantus. Now, this is actually pulled from the original Expanded Universe trilogy, Heir to the Empire. It's where Thrawn clones like an evil Jedi and different clone troopers to help take down the New Republic. But the Bad Batch has actually canonized this mountain, making it the home of special Imperial projects like cloning. And later on, I'm going to talk about all of this as setting up.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
So, Omega is on Mount Tantus and she sees Crosshair. And notice that he is wearing this white prisoner jumpsuit. We saw prisoners wear something similar in the show Star Wars Rebels, but also in the iconic arc in the show Andor. But the jumpsuits were actually inspired by George Lucas's first film, first feature at least, THX 1138, a dystopian future where human beings are forced to conform through drugs and entertainment.
That man was a prophet.
Which he was, which is why we made our prequel apologist Thank You George shirts. Now this whole theme of prisoners being made to conform in THX 1138 also aligns with what the Empire is doing to the Old Republic and the entire galaxy in this show. But Omega, remember, is not a prisoner. Notice she is even wearing a patch of the Cloner Guild, like the clones in training we saw in Attack of the Clones and by Dr. Pershing in The Mandalorian. The operation at Mount Tantus is actually being led by Dr. Royce Hemlock, voiced perfectly by Jimmy Simpson. Now Hemlock, of course, is a poisonous plant.
Like chocolate?
Yes, it's a poison poisonous plant like chocolate, and Socrates famously drank it in prison to kill himself.
Socrates killed himself with chocolate?
No, Doug, he killed himself with hemlock like Dr. Hemlock, the boss of Mount Tantus. Now, the implication of his name with him in charge of a prison is that Crosshair and Omega will die in this prison when they are no longer considered useful. He is flanked by these Imperial clone commandos, the final clone troopers in Imperial service. You can always spot them from their glowing visors, and also the bottoms of their helmets look a lot more like the Gen 1 clone helmets that we saw in Attack of the Clones. And then Emperor Palpatine arrives on Mount Tantus flanked by Nala Se and voiced by Ian McDermott. He says,
"There is nothing of greater importance to secure the future of this empire."
Now what he means there obviously is this is key in securing his future. See, Palpatine is obsessed with immortality. He claimed that his master, Darth Plagueis the Wise, had mastered the way to not die, and he lured in Anakin by promising they would learn this power together through the dark side. Now, of course, we all thought that Palpatine died in Return of the Jedi, but then
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Now look, the Rise of Skywalker novelization actually explains a lot of this, like the cloning techniques and stuff like that were hinted at here.
Dark science. Cloning.
So like now in Star Wars, everything from the Mandalorian to the Bad Batch is just trying to retcon Palpatine's return. And you know what? If this show makes the Rise of Skywalker better, like how the Clone Wars improved the prequels, I am all for it. What Palpatine's speech is setting up though is that the full resources of the Empire will be brought down on the Bad Batch this season. Now right here, we see an Old Republic AT-TE exploding, and it looks like it's in a junkyard, symbolic of how the clones themselves were being treated as disposable junk last season. And this shot where they're on the bridge is the same sequence that we saw in the opening of the trailer. We actually see this bridge in the background to one of those first shots in the video. And then we see the amazing Ming-Na Wen's character, Fennec Shand. Now, she had a much larger role to play in the Book of Boba Fett, but in the Bad Batch, we saw her very early days as a bounty hunter. She was paid by Nala Se to retrieve Omega, while the Empire and the other Kaminoans paid off the vicious Cad Bane to find her for themselves, leading the two of them to fight one another in Season 1. Now, Cad Bane is one of the greatest Clone Wars villains, recently brought into live action in the Book of Boba Fett. Now, his look with the wide-brimmed hat and the long duster was actually based on Clyde Van Cleef, and the way he looked in the Sergio Leone Man with No Name trilogy. Even the way he walks into this bar with the sun behind him is reminiscent of an old western, where an outlaw walks into a saloon. Now, you might think that since these two have butted heads in the past, that he might be here to fight Fennec Shand. But look, these two are professionals, and I actually hope they just sit down here for a drink. They might even be there to meet another former bounty hunter who, like Cad Bane, used to run with Boba Fett, and I am talking about Asajj Ventress.
Yeah, talk about her.
Now, in past seasons, the Bad Batch faced off against these bounty hunters, when they were tasked to kidnap Omega. But now I'm wondering if the Bad Batch are actually going to hire these bounty hunters to help save Omega. It would be a great way to bring this show full circle. In fact, if they do end up working with Asajj Ventress, maybe it's Ventress who calls all these former bounty hunters together.
What would happen if you just called Taylor up?
And here we see a shot of Omega with much longer hair piloting a ship. We see Wrecker fighting an alligator monster, and this ship looks like a miniature dreadnought. And then, Doug, you ready for this? We get the return of the Clone Wars alum, Asajj Ventress.
I wasn't planning on killing you, but you're making it very tempting.
Finally, yes! Now who is she again?
She comes from the planet Dathomir, same planet as Darth Maul, and she is a former Night Sister who would go on to become an apprentice of Count Dooku. You may remember the Night Sisters from the show Ahsoka Tano, or even from the Jedi Fallen Order games. So Ventress, with her two red sabers, she went toe-to-toe with the likes of Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi many times in the Clone Wars series. Now what happened though is that Sidious became kind of wary that Dooku was planning to overthrow him, so he ordered Dooku to kill Ventress to prove his loyalty to his master. Ventress survived the attempt on her life and became a bounty hunter. Now, during her time as a bounty hunter, she met Quinlan Vos in the novel Dark Disciple. Now, this novel, Dark Disciple, was based on unused story treatments for an arc of the Clone Wars series. In the novel, we see Ventress and Vos team up to take on Count Dooku. In their battle with Dooku, we are led to believe that Ventress sacrificed herself to save Vos, who we know survived Order 66 after his name was mentioned in the Kenobi series.
Quinlan was here.
Now, the novel says that Ventress was shocked to death by Dooku's Force lightning, but I guess we're going to learn that she ended up surviving this encounter. It's also in this novel's artwork and in unused Clone Wars artwork that we saw Ventress with a new hairstyle that we see being used here in the Bad Batch. And we can also see this symbol of a snake on her shoulder plate. Now, in this artwork from 2014 that we found on the Clone Wars official Facebook page, the snake is said to represent a misunderstood creature that is thought to be dangerous and evil, when in fact they are not, paralleling Ventress turning away from the dark side. We also see that Ventress is using a yellow saber that still has a curved hilt like her red sabers that she used during the Clone Wars. So yellow sabers are not a common lightsaber color, but we have seen them in canon. The Jedi Temple guards use yellow bladed sabers, and we also saw Rey with a yellow lightsaber in Rise of Skywalker. Yellow sabers are meant to represent a Jedi Sentinel, a Jedi who has perfected their skills and brought a balance of both combat and knowledge to their overall skill set. Sentinels are very technical and can be known to take a middle ground approach, a style between that of a more forceful approach and a laid-back approach. So this could be meant to symbolize Ventress not being on the dark side or the light and walking down a path somewhere in the middle. So guys, that's all the Easter eggs we found, but if you found any, let us know in the comments below, and big shout out to Colton Ogburn who helped me write this video. You can find his socials and mine below. And guys, if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.